Friends, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but I have a little announcement that I want to make. Last year, as you all know, or many of you will know, we launched an appeal for the Venerable Sangharakshita's 60th birthday fund. And we were aiming to set up facilities for our teacher and the head of the order so that he could function much more effectively for the next few years. Just 2 weeks ago, I signed the contract for Guhyaloka. Guhyaloka, the secret world, the esoteric realm, is a 200-acre valley in the mountains behind Alicante. It's a very, very beautiful spot indeed. And it's here that we'll be developing Bante's, I was going to say winter quarters, but actually it's going to be his summer quarters. And it'll also be where the Tuscany retreats will in future take place. So Tuscany will now be in Spain.
This is Guhyaloka in 1986, as here the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order are to hold the men's ordination retreats, which over recent years had been held in Italy. Ordination retreats for women will take place elsewhere. This story follows the first year of the creation of Guhyaloka and the birth of a new mythology.
The original idea of Guhyaloka was, of course, that it should provide me with a place to stay, especially during the winter, a place that was warmer than Britain, and where I could get on with my literary and other work. That was the original idea, that was the germ, as it were. But of course I didn't have the idea, I don't know what other people thought or felt, but I didn't myself have the idea of living there in complete seclusion, because if I wanted to get on with my literary work, I wouldn't want to spend time shopping or cooking or anything of that sort. So if I was not to do all those things myself, I would need somebody to do them for me. So that suggested that if I was to be able to stay there, I would need supporting a community. So I then thought, well, if I have to have a community anyway, in order to be able to stay there and get on with my work, we might as well have a community that was concerned with conducting ordination retreats as well as with looking after me. And that therefore meant that we need not go to Italy, to Il Convento, to a hired place every year, but go instead to a place of our own.
And I came here in 1985 for a retreat at El Bloque and had a look round and felt immediately that Spain was the right place for us to be, both because it's quite a long way south and therefore quite warm, because it's quite cheap, and also because Spain itself seems a country that's very much expanding and very open at present. Well, after the retreat at El Bloque, Dolf Intveld took myself and the other two order members who are supporting the retreat on a trip round the area. And in fact, we circled what is now Guhyaloka. And I remember very clearly stopping on a track just outside Finestrat and looking back into these hills and saying, this seems to be the right sort of area. Anyway, I told Dolf that we would like him to have a look round, and I rang him just before I went off to India, the end of '85, and asked him to keep his eye out.
Over the last 6 years, Dolf Intveld has been running the evolutionary centre El Bloque, over the other side of the mountains.
I have been driving around a lot and looked throughout the scenery. And one of the days I have been driving on this road, this very road, in that direction, and the gate who was over here was at that time locked. And at the moment I passed here, we haven't even stopped. My mind saw the closed gate and I thought, gosh, one day I want to see what is beyond that gate. Just as a sort of a pool, and there was a huge locker on it, so there was no way. So we went on. One day, yes, we set out to look for a place, and we realized that maybe what is behind the gate would be the place we wanted to see. And I've forgotten a little bit where it was, so we were driving in the valley of Selja. And then at a certain moment we saw 3 huge black birds. And okay, in my fantasy it could be eagles. In a way they were flying above the mountains. And as we watched them carefully, we saw a track going between the mountains. And we followed them, and in a way they flew through a sort of narrow passage through which we followed them. And then we saw this valley here, and I started to remember the day when we drove out here. And actually you could say that the birds led us to this very place. And when we came here, we looked around there to see if it was the right track. When we came here, the gate was open. So, I think then I got the message, and when we drove up, we saw at the first turn-off to the lower house a brand new sign which said Se vende esta finca, with a telephone number. And when we walked to the house, we asked the man if it was for sale, and with a huge smile he came outside and he said yes, but it is 1 million square meters. And of course he thought it would blow our mind, and I had the idea, gosh, why not?
And he came across this valley and phoned me and said that he'd got what he thought was a very suitable place, and several others. When I got over here, he only had this one. There weren't actually any others. I came up here for the morning. This was just after I arrived in Spain. And yes, I was immediately taken with the place. But at the same time I was a bit worried because there were 2 plots of land which were in the centre of the valley. And I realised we had to have them as well. But I also realised that the owners were going to charge us a lot of money to have them. So that presented problems. And it wasn't really quite what we'd been looking for in a way. We'd been looking for a building that was already finished, that we could move into more or less straight away. But from so many other points of view, it was very attractive indeed. And so, we gradually went towards getting it.
Estábamos allí comiendo cuando entró el señor Rodolfo.
Y la señora
Y preguntó que si podía ver la
The
casa.
main bit of
Sí,
land
señor, puede usted subir a ver.
is Salvador Cantó, who's a porter in Benidorm. He used to live in the village of Sella, but like many people in Sella, he couldn't make a living out of the land here and wanted to get into Benidorm where the tourist trade is and where money is. So he was selling his ancestral land, as it were.
Along the coast, some 40 kilometres away, is the regional capital of Alicante. Immediately inland from the coast, the mountains start to rise up, some to heights of 4,500 feet, like Puig Campana, bell-shaped peak, which has a view over a complex system of mountains. From the base of one of the impressive rocks guarding the valley flows the spring that marks the entry into Guhyaloka. For some time the land had taken its name from the derelict house known as El Morer, perhaps meaning mulberry tree, or even a reference to the Moors who lived here and built the terraces in which, in their time, Salvador's grandparents cultivated vines. The track winds upwards through almonds and olives, holly oak and pine, to the only recent building, the weekend bungalow built by Pepe, an Alicante bar owner. This will be the house Svante Sangharakshita uses when he stays.
Most of the money that was raised has been spent on the land itself, the property itself. because we felt it was extremely important to have a place that was completely secluded. And we didn't want just to buy a small amount of land, which we could have done, and then had the experience a few years later of people building holiday homes and so on, just a few dozen yards away. People often ask me to give names to communities, and very often I have to think quite a bit about this before I can decide what name would be suitable. But in the case of Guhyaloka, it wasn't quite like that, because I went there myself early last year. I saw the place, and I think I hadn't been there more than a few minutes before I felt quite strongly that the name for this place should be Guhyaloka. And that name seemed to emerge quite spontaneously. Guhya, of course, means secret. It means esoteric. It's a Sanskrit word, and it's connected with the word for a cave. And a cave is clearly a place for withdrawal. It's secret, it's hidden. So Guhya suggests all that, Loka simply meaning a place or an abode. So Guhyaloka is the secret place, the esoteric abode. Even, if you like, the abode of mystery is all of that. And after I'd spent just a few minutes in that particular valley, that did seem the really suitable name for it, the natural name for it.
We've got a 6-month project to set up the facilities for Banti to be there next year and for the Tuscany to take place there next year. So I'm looking for 10 able-bodied, willing, strong men to form a community, a 6-month community, where we'll work hard and we'll study hard and meditate hard. Don't all rush. I shall be standing in the hallway afterwards with a clipboard and a pen. And if you are interested, please come and see me.
20 or so men are briefed, and in mid-July the first wave of volunteers joined Subhuti in Spain. And within a couple of weeks, an 11-strong community is established. Each new person arriving found there was something striking about Guhyaloka.
Subhuti greeted us with dinner from the night before, which he had cooked us, which we had for breakfast, and it was wonderful arriving, and we were both dead beat because we hadn't really slept much the night before. But Subhuti gave us a warm welcome.
It's just astounding in terms of the natural scenery. It's just quite unbelievable. You try to describe it, nobody would believe you, so there's not much point really. When driving up from Saya, when Subhuti drove me up, it just got more and more beautiful. And every time we rounded a corner, my eyes opened even wider and my jaw dropped a bit more, sort of thing.
And I don't really know what to expect in the next 4 months, and whether I'll be up to the work. There's going to be a lot of building work in the next 4 months, so yeah, apprehensive on that score.
I think people's reasons for going out there were probably very mixed. I don't think everyone went out for the same reason. Some, I think, went out because they couldn't think of anything better to do, or because they didn't have anything pressing to do at that particular time. Others liked the idea of seeing something of Spain. Others liked the idea of spending some time with Subhuti and possibly studying and meditating with Subhuti. I'm sure that was an attraction for quite a few people.
But you see the seed syllable in his heart quivering. So the seed syllable is the essence, the quintessence of the Bodhisattva.
I wanted to get the buildings prepared, and the best way about that seemed to be to get people from England to come and do it. But I also wanted to make sure it was an enjoyable retreat for people, that they would benefit from it. And I've had quite a bit of experience of working on building projects, organising building projects, and I know the way in which they can get a bit flat after a while. People just feel they're working and they're not getting much else out of it. So I really wanted to try to avoid this, and initially conceived of the whole thing as a building retreat, or a retreat with building going on. I wanted that to be the main thing, that it was a retreat. I wanted people to come out of it really having benefited. And particularly I hoped that people who were preparing for ordination would come, and that this would be a definite step for them in the direction of ordination.
The lack of accommodation is initially not a problem for the community. During the hot summer months, people sleep outside, just using El Morer as their base. But once the purchase of Pepe's bungalow is completed, that then becomes the headquarters.
It's actually central with this.
Further up the valley, the focus is on building from scratch. The brief is to create enough temporary facilities so that 30 or 40 people can spend 3-month retreats in relative comfort. Indra Bodhi has come from doing building work in Brighton to supervise.
We couldn't decide in the first few days, in fact the first fortnight really, we couldn't really decide where to start building. There was 4 of us here initially, and we were just going around to different places and sort of deciding this was the perfect spot, and then going to another place and thinking, well, that's very good as well. And it took us a long time for everybody to agree where to build. So if we allowed one here, and then built the other one sort of related to it there, down there, yeah. What's beyond here? Anything? Nothing. No say. Do you have a look? One further over there. Or one on that.
We're on different levels,
Yeah.
but sort of related, as it were. One of the things I felt to be very, very important is that we don't prematurely do anything on the site. The valley is so beautiful and we could so easily spoil it. It's quite important that we get to know it. There are parts of the valley that are in shadow virtually the whole of the winter months. In the winter, there are parts of the valley where the sun doesn't come till 10 or 11 o'clock. So we need to get to know the valley in its different moods, its different characteristics, work out where the best place to build is from these points of view.
With Mandarava, blue lotus and jasmine.
With Mandarava, blue lotus and jasmine.
With all flowers pleasing and fragrant.
With all flowers pleasing and fragrant.
And with garlands skillfully woven.
And with garlands skillfully woven.
I pay honour to the princes of the sages.
I pay honour to the princes of the sages.
So worthy of veneration.
So worthy of veneration.
I envelop them in clouds of incense.
I envelop them in clouds of incense.
Sweet and penetrating.
Sweet and penetrating.
I make them offerings of food hard and soft.
I make them offerings of food hard and soft.
And pleasing kinds of liquids to drink.
And pleasing kinds of liquids to drink.
I offer them lamps encrusted with jewels.
I offer them lamps encrusted with jewels.
Festooned with golden lotus.
Festooned with golden lotus.
On the paving sprinkled with perfume.
On the paving sprinkled with perfume.
I scatter handfuls of beautiful flowers.
I scatter handfuls of beautiful flowers.
Once the sites are chosen, the construction of a shrine room, a kitchen and 2 rows of huts can begin. The earth that is cleared from the sites is put into onion sacks, which are used to make up the walls, and these will support the large vaulted roofs to be cast in position from yeso, the local gypsum.
On the design side of the buildings, it's been quite organic, you might say, because we haven't had a definite plan for the huts. We've just we've had a brief that they've got to be very cheaply constructed, and when we actually started building with the sacks, we didn't have any idea that we would have domes on top of them. We'd originally planned for just much higher walls and a flat roof, but as the sort of plan developed, we changed that because of the cheapness of the yeso. So we decided to have dome roofs, partly because they just look so much nicer too. I mean, I've done building work for years in England, but I felt quite thrown at times here. I mean, everything's different. Like the materials, the size of the bricks, the shape of the bricks, the type of plaster. It's quite disconcerting, but I mean, it's. I think it's good for us. I think we've got to throw out everything that we're used to. You know, we had all these sort of ideas in our heads about how easy and quick it was going to be, but I mean, that just wasn't to be. Not at all.
Good. Lovely.
Oh, lovely.
Morning, Paramajoti. It's 5 o'clock.
At the beginning of the retreat, people got up and went to work after a morning meditation. But working through the midday heat for 5 hours left people so exhausted, a new program was evolved. Starting work at dawn, lunch, a siesta, and meditation in the afternoons, and then study in the evenings.
This one hasn't been run over, but couldn't have got in there before this was dismembered. Yeah, so. Yeah. There's lots of flies, eggs being laid in.
35. Una bolsa de pan.
Say a junior school.
My meditation.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say.
Which is that gallery in London which has got exceptional improvements? Is that the National? It's up at the back on the right hand side of the building.
National? Because it's very dull.
And really, I think it's just
well,
really
it's a good person.
With you.
In some ways, what impressed me most about the valley, out of all the things that I saw, was the spring. The spring is at the bottom of the property, at the lower end of the property. And it's a sort of, one might say, classical spring. There's a spring very much like it on the outskirts of Bertignano, which people must have used in those days. And I'm sure there are springs like it all over the Mediterranean world. Yeah? The spring consists of a sort of stone trough into which water pours. At least when I was there, when I went to visit the spring, it was pouring. And it of course pours down from higher up in the valley. But surrounding the spring are all sorts of wonderful rocks. It's the spring is in a secluded sort of corner, and it has a very definite sort of atmosphere, and I couldn't help recalling that in the ancient world, in the classical world of Greece and Rome, springs were very important, not just for the sake of the water, but in all sorts of other ways. They had all sorts of associations. Nymphs were associated with springs. The muses even were associated with springs. So springs came to represent the sources of inspiration, one might say. So here was this spring at the lower end of the valley. And it seemed to me, in a way, to represent or to symbolize the sort of inspiration sort of bubbling up from the depths that one might well be able to experience living in a place like Guhyaloka. Inspiration of the creative kind as manifested perhaps in the arts, especially perhaps in literature, and also the kind of inspiration that one experiences in connection with meditation. And I recalled that the Buddha's simile for the second dhyana was that of a spring of water bubbling up in the depths of a lake. So it seems to me that this spring, in a way, was highly symbolic, because Guhyaloka itself, I felt, with its silence and its solitude and its seclusion, would provide very, very fitting conditions for the springing up of inspiration of one kind or another in the hearts, in the minds of the people actually living there, whether they were on solitary retreat or whether they were on an ordination retreat or whether they were just members of the resident spiritual community.
Weather of late summer is suddenly shattered by an unseasonable downpour, which breaks 40 years of records. 20 inches of torrential rain falls during one night and continues for 3 days. An emergency team sets out to protect the huts that have just been made ready for some new volunteers who will now be stranded in the village of Seya.
Between the arches.
Fill it up to make a flat level, then we'll fill up and put sacks on top of the forest. Indra, I'm going to quickly get a couple of sacks up, okay? Good eye.
It put us under a lot of pressure. We had to do an emergency job on saving the huts. The rain started to damage them. We also had the Land Rover stuck in the mud, so we had to. We were under quite a lot of pressure just to try and get that out.
It's completely slide. Okay.
It looked as though the mountains were sort of getting washed away. Everywhere we looked there was huge muddy rivers flowing down the mountains.
Waterlogged mud slides down the mountains, taking with it trees, boulders and parts of the road. Guhyaloka is cut off. Food and supplies are to be carried in from the village, a 2-hour walk each way.
Terrific render.
Hey! Big rock.
I think under the conditions, it was really quite harmonious, and not a false sense of harmony. I mean, the fact that we sit together in the meditation in the shrine room every day, it's not that difficult for us all to sit together in cramped conditions for a few days, and generally feel okay.
The rains were like that. They were a time of great tension and great stress and resolution. And afterwards, the community did feel much. It felt very good.
The run back again.
A week into October, and the full 17-strong community finally meet up on the broken road.
I thought they were just going to do it from the ordinary.
It is time in the region for the almond harvest. These terraces were carved out of the mountains by the Moors, whose country it was for 700 years. Many of the terraces now lie derelict under gorse and bramble, with only the olives and almonds able to survive a now derelict irrigation system.
What we need is water. I mean, if we put some effort into irrigation, we could grow anything you'd like to name. We could grow fruit, we could grow melons, we could grow courgettes, we could grow all sorts of market garden crops. It seems like quite a good climate. A lot of sun, and the soil, when we dig into it, seems amazing, but it's water clearly that's the limiting factor, and especially water in the summer when the weather's decent. If we could have some way of storing water in the winter or supplying the terraces from the springs, we could, I mean, the sky's the limit to what we could grow.
Estos que si fueran todas de estas redondas.
For a couple of weeks, the almonds were picked, peeled, dried in the sun, and taken to find a buyer.
Esto es buen clima, ¿eh?
Sí, es muy bueno.
The neglected trees and arid conditions had produced a poor crop. But the price is fair and the extra few £100s are useful.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.
I shall be staying at the bungalow. It really needs a lot of work done on it. Especially it needs to be enlarged. We really need to build 2 or 3 more rooms. Partly because I'm thinking in terms of having 2 or 3 people staying there with me sometimes, especially people who come out to get on with their literary work. And at present there just isn't room. There's only room really for myself and one other person, but I'd like there to be room for at least 2 or 3 other people. I'd like to extend the facilities. But at present there just isn't the money for that.
November brings with it surprisingly harsh weather. During a period of gales and rain, one of the vaulted roofs collapses, with Richard and Crispin still on it. Fortunately, no one was inside at the time.
As Richard and I lifted this sack up, I heard a crack. And the next thing, I was about to get off the hut. The next thing that was that Richard and I were lying on the ground amidst a lot of debris.
Do you remember going down?
You will remember it very clearly. I remember trying to think what's going to land on top of me.
Bit of a disaster, really, isn't it?
It certainly is.
And behind it all, one's aware that somebody could have got killed or could have got hurt, and that's what makes the whole thing actually pretty serious at the moment. So it's all very much in the air, and it's just called into question what happens next.
Next day, a very shaken community meets, and a small team is commissioned to examine the standards of safety.
I've had 10 years building experience.
Discussion ranged over the way the work was carried out and the nature of the community itself.
I do take responsibility.
And they then came to a conclusion.
The result of it has been that the retreat is going to hopefully continue over a longer span. Originally it was intended to be till the end of January. Now it's going to be, and then it was to be the end of February, and now it's hopefully going to be extended to the early summer. The rider on that being that there's going to be a smaller community working at a slower pace, so that there won't be the kind of breakdown of communication, which actually was one of the contributing factors to that accident.
As the winter deepens, some members leave and a scaled-down community continues with the project. There are now 2 work schedules, one for foul and one for fair weather. Suspect roofs are being shored up with wooden beams. Work forges ahead on 2 permanent buildings, the kitchen and the Stage 1 shrine room. Also, an experimental reservoir is constructed. Work is only part of life here. The valley's natural beauty, majesty and even mystery are awesome. Not only is a retreat centre being developed here, but there is a new and rich mythology.
I suppose, first of all, as a myth, Guhyaloka aligns with the idea of a pure land, that sort of thing. It's a world complete in itself, where all other elements are missing. There's nothing else there, there's nothing distracting, there's nothing unpleasant or untoward there at all. I think that's a very, very strong feeling for most people here, that Guhyaloka is a world in itself, the secret world, the esoteric world. It does seem to have a life of its own in some strange way. I suppose the most striking thing about the valley are the rocks, particularly these huge rocks, which are like sentinels guarding the valley as strange mythological creatures.
Spain is the land of many legends. In this region there are tales of Arabs and graveyards, giants and pots of gold. One tells of a giant who a long, long time ago lived on top of the mountain. He got so annoyed with the sun not getting to his house that he kicked a huge hole in the rock face. The fragment flew far out to sea, landed in the Bay of Benidorm where it now lies.
There do seem to be natural forces here, not malevolent, but worthy of respect. We've lived here out in the open and very much exposed to the elements, and the elements have been quite harsh in a way. We've had this dramatic rain. We've had a lot of cold weather, very cold weather, for which we were not really adequately prepared at all. We've had some spectacular winds and incredible fogs which just completely cut Guhyaloka off. Sometimes we have fogs which just sit at the bottom of the valley and cut the rest of the world off so that we hang above it. And also in the summer it's extremely hot, and dangerously hot in some ways. People have to be a bit careful with that heat. So we've learnt to appreciate both the beauty and the isolation and the tranquility of the place, but also to treat with respect the natural elements around us. And I think that's a very healthy and very positive thing. And I think most people who've been here, even if they've found it quite hard to be living in such conditions, have appreciated that close contact with nature. We really are living in the midst of nature. And I hope that we never build things up so much that, if we stop seeing nature. I hope that we continue to live sort of in nature. I think that has a very healthy, very positive effect on people who come here. You can't help but sort of realise that rocks can fall off the cliffs, and that rain can come and sweep away a hut that's been built. I think this is very important, that it helps one to sort of really appreciate the impermanence and insubstantiality of things, that even these mountains that have been here for millions of years, move and come and go and so forth. So I think that's all part of the mythology of Guhyaloka. It's both an ideal world, but also it's a living world. And one must live in it with respect for its life.
The early story of Guhyaloka already extends beyond the confines of the valley. Local friends have become interested in Buddhism through the FWBO activities in Spain. The Venerable Sangharakshita gave his first talk to a Spanish-speaking audience in Valencia one December afternoon.
The study of the Dharma helps us to know ourselves.
El estudio del Dharma nos ayuda a conocernos a nosotros mismos.
So I don't think it is possible to know yourself completely first and then take up some spiritual path.
Así que no creo que es posible conocerse completamente y entonces.
How much of the year I shall be spending at Guhyaloka, I simply can't say. I don't even really know how I will feel staying there for any length of time. But what I propose to do is to stay there this year for the ordination retreat, and that no doubt will be a fairly regular pattern, at least for some time. But inasmuch as the place is our own, I shall have the possibility of going out there earlier if I wish, sometime before the ordination retreat starts, and staying on after it has finished, again for as long as I wish, or as long as circumstances permit. So the facilities are there, but to what extent I'm able to use them and how great a portion of my year will be spent there, that remains to be seen. But I hope that eventually, at least after some years, assuming I live so long, I will be able to spend, half or even 2/3 or more of my time there, getting on with literary work and other such things.
This is how the first year of Guhyaloka was spent. In time, the temporary buildings will be replaced with more permanent ones, with better facilities. Only in the future will the significance of Guhyaloka, the secret world, the esoteric abode, start to emerge.